Welcome to another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be looking at some fascinating stuff from a business textbook. It's not as dry as you might think. We're going to be diving into the core elements of how businesses work, especially in this crazy interconnected world we live in now.
Yeah, it's really interesting stuff. It really lays the foundation for understanding how wealth is actually created and how businesses need to adapt to survive in today's, ever-changing market.
Right. I think most people understand the basic factors of production, land, labor, capital. But this book throws in a real curveball. It talks about a fifth factor, which I think a lot of people don't consider: knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. Just having resources in today's economy just isn't enough. It's the access to information and expertise that really makes or breaks a company these days.
It's true.
You could have, all the money in the world, all the materials in the world, but if you don't have the right knowledge, you're not going to get very far.
Makes you wonder if that's why we see these massive shifts in industries, that we see companies struggling to keep up with all the technological advancements. Speaking of which, this book dives into a really interesting example: drones. They're popping up everywhere. And they seem to be like this case study in opportunity, but also controversy.
Yeah, it's a great example of how technology can really disrupt industries, and not always in a super straightforward way. Think about the possibilities. Construction companies using drones for site surveys, farmers using them to monitor crops, even packages arriving at your doorstep via drone.
Okay, that last one is definitely pretty cool. But the book doesn't shy away from the concerns either. The safety aspect is a big one, right? You've got airspace to worry about, potential collisions, even just, the risk of a drone malfunctioning and falling out of the sky.
Yeah, and then there's the privacy issue. You've got drones with cameras, which raises all sorts of questions about surveillance and, who has access to that footage. So it's this real balancing act between harnessing this amazing potential of the technology, but also safeguarding against the risks. What do you think? Is the convenience and the innovation worth the potential trade-offs?
It's tricky, isn't it? It feels like with any new technology, there's this period of the Wild West, where everyone's trying to figure out the rules.
Absolutely.
Speaking of adapting to a changing world, though, the book uses a really interesting example of a company that's had to do just that: Grubhub.
Oh, yeah.
Remember when they were just like a website for ordering pizza, late night in college? They've come a long way, and it's not by accident. They had to expand their market beyond just students, thinking about families, working professionals, people who want healthier options, and all while facing intense competition from these other delivery services. I find it fascinating how they've managed to thrive in such a cutthroat market, though.
Yeah.
The book points out that Grubhub has benefited from a favorable business environment in the U.S. Things like a stable currency, less red tape, it allows for more innovation and entrepreneurship. But they also cleverly harness the power of mobile technology. They created this user-friendly platform that made ordering food ridiculously easy.
Absolutely. It's a great example of a company understanding, both the big picture forces at play, but also making smart decisions about how to use their resources and, adapt to changing consumer behavior. But, the story's not over. They've got rivals like DoorDash and Uber Eats constantly trying to catch up. How do you think they'll need to keep innovating to stay ahead?
The competition is fierce. It makes you wonder what the next big disruption in the food delivery space will be.
Yeah.
This book got me thinking about another interesting trend that ties into sustainability. It's this product as a service model. It seems like a pretty radical departure from how we traditionally think about owning things.
It really is. It's moving away from that idea of outright ownership to paying for access or usage. The book mentions some really interesting examples like BMW's car sharing program and Zipcar. So instead of buying a car, you just pay for the time that you use it.
Okay, I get the concept, but what makes this model more sustainable? Is it just about using fewer resources overall?
It's a lot more nuanced than that. Because companies retain ownership of the products, they're actually incentivized to make them more durable, more repairable. Think about it. If you're selling a product outright, you might actually benefit from it breaking down so the customer has to buy a new one.
Right.
But if you're providing it as a service, it's in your best interest for that product to last as long as possible.
Wait, so if a company owns the product, they're more likely to make it last longer. That's pretty clever.
Yeah.
It forces a different kind of thinking about the entire life cycle of a product.
Yeah, exactly. And this model has the potential to shift our entire mindset away from constant consumption towards a more circular economy. What do you think? Could you see yourself adopting this model for certain products or services?
It's funny you mention that, because It's funny you mention that because I've been thinking about getting a new printer, and the idea of just paying for the pages I print instead of like dealing with owning and maintaining the whole thing is pretty appealing. Maybe this product as a service thing is going to be bigger than we realize.
Yeah, it's certainly gaining traction. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that's been a major force in shaping the business world: globalization. This book lays out some really important things for companies to think about if they're thinking about going international. It's not as simple as just selling your product overseas.
No kidding. I remember reading about those American car companies that refused to make right-hand drive vehicles for countries like the UK and Australia. What a missed opportunity. It seems like cultural sensitivity is a huge factor.
It's absolutely crucial. And the book actually points out that American businesses in particular have sometimes been accused of having this kind of ethnocentric view, you know, assuming that their way of doing things is automatically the best.
Right.
And that can be a real deal breaker when you're trying to win over customers in a foreign market. You need to understand the local culture, adapt your products or services to meet local needs, and be respectful of different ways of doing business.
It makes you wonder if that's why some companies have stumbled when trying to expand globally. It's like they just assumed their success at home would automatically translate overseas.
Yeah, and it often doesn't work that way. There are so many factors to consider: economic conditions, legal and regulatory hurdles, even just the physical environment can pose challenges. I mean, a product that sells well in a warm climate might not be suitable for a colder region, for example. It's about being adaptable and willing to learn from your mistakes.
Speaking of adapting, the book tells this really interesting story about electrobikes. They found this niche market with those cool upright bikes that are perfect for city riding. But when bigger companies started copying their style, they had to get creative.
They did. Instead of trying to fight this losing battle in the US market, they made the bold decision to expand into Asia, setting up manufacturing in Taiwan. It was a risky move, but it paid off big time. They were able to tap into a new market, stay ahead of the competition, and even benefit from lower production costs. It's a great example of how sometimes the best way to survive is to completely change the game.
It's such a valuable lesson. Sometimes playing defense just isn't enough. You've got to be proactive and find new ways to grow. But let's zoom in on a specific example of economic integration that's had a huge impact on global business: the European Union.
Yeah, the EU is fascinating because it represents this grand experiment in creating a single market with free movement of goods, services, and people across all these different member countries. In theory, it sounds fantastic, but in practice, it's faced some serious challenges.
Yeah. The book talks about Brexit, the UK's exit from the EU, as being a major disruption. And then there were those financial difficulties experienced by some member countries like Greece. It makes you wonder if the benefits of economic integration outweigh the potential downsides.
It's a complex issue for sure. On the one hand, you have the potential for increased trade, economic growth, and even political stability. But on the other hand, you have concerns about loss of sovereignty, economic disparities between member states, and the bureaucratic challenges of managing such a large and diverse bloc. Do you think the EU will ultimately succeed in achieving its goals?
Honestly, I'm not sure. It feels like they're constantly trying to find that balance between unity and autonomy, and finding that sweet spot is incredibly difficult. But let's shift gears again and talk about a company that's had a more positive experience with globalization: the story of a Post-it note. It's one of those products that's so ubiquitous it's hard to imagine life without it. But as the book explains, it was born out of a bit of a happy accident.
Right. This 3M employee, Art Fry, was frustrated with his bookmarks falling out of his hymnal at church. And he had this idea for a lightly adhesive paper that could be stuck and restuck without leaving any residue. At first, people didn't really get it, but 3M persisted. They sent out free samples, and eventually word of mouth took over.
It's amazing how sometimes the simplest ideas can be the most revolutionary. But I think what's really interesting here is this concept of entrepreneurship, which the book highlights. It's like entrepreneurship, but within an existing company.
Right.
You have employees like Art Fry who are thinking outside the box, coming up with innovative solutions, and driving change from within. It makes you wonder what kind of creative potential is being unleashed in companies that encourage that kind of thinking.
It's a powerful force. And the book actually mentions that 3M has this policy where employees are encouraged to spend a portion of their time brainstorming new ideas. It's baked into their culture. Think about your own work environment. Do you feel empowered to suggest new ideas or take risks? Or does it feel more like a stay in your lane kind of atmosphere?
That's a great question. It makes me think about how companies can either stifle or nurture that entrepreneurial spirit. But let's talk about another fundamental aspect of business, ownership structures. The book does a really good job of breaking down the different options, from sole proprietorships to partnerships to corporations. It can feel a bit overwhelming if you're not familiar with all the terminology.
It's true, there's a lot to unpack. But the key is understanding the trade-offs involved. So, for example, a sole proprietorship is the simplest form, but you're personally liable for all the debts of the business. A corporation offers limited liability, but it comes with more complex regulations and potential for double taxation. And then you have these hybrids like LLCs, which offer a blend of benefits.
It seems like choosing the right structure depends on a lot of factors. The size and scope of your business, your risk tolerance, even your long-term goals.
Absolutely. And the book provides some really interesting case studies, like the story of Pets and Products, which makes those dog treadmills. They opted for an LLC structure, which gives them flexibility and limited liability, but they also face some challenges in terms of deducting fringe benefits for members. It highlights how there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
It sounds like finding the right legal and financial framework for your business is almost as important as the product or service you're offering. Speaking of expanding your reach, the book also talks about franchising, which seems like a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, franchising can be a great way for entrepreneurs to tap into a proven system, leveraging brand recognition and the support of the franchisor. I mean, think about the success of chains like McDonald's or Subway. Their franchise model has allowed them to expand so rapidly. But it's not without its downsides. Franchisees typically have to pay upfront fees and ongoing royalties, and they often have less autonomy in terms of how they run their businesses. It's a trade-off between independence and support.
The book actually highlights some really successful entrepreneurs who've made their mark in the franchise world, like Junior Bridgman, the former NBA player who built this empire of Chili's, Wendy's, and Blaze Pizza franchises. It's inspiring to see how people can leverage their skills and experience to find success in unexpected places. But let's shift gears one last time and talk about something that's often seen as the less glamorous side of business: accounting.
Ah, yes, accounting. The language of business. It can seem intimidating, but it's really about keeping track of the money, understanding where it's coming from, where it's going, and ultimately making sure the business is financially healthy. The book does a good job of explaining the basics using this analogy of managing your personal finances.
Right. It's like keeping track of your income and expenses, except on a much larger scale for a business.
Exactly. And just like with your personal finances, if you're not paying attention to the numbers, things can get out of control pretty quickly. The book highlights the importance of financial statements, like the income statement, the balance sheet, and the statement of cash flows, as tools for understanding a company's performance.
Okay, I have to admit, when I hear terms like balance sheet and cash flows, my eyes start to glaze over a bit. But I get the basic idea. These statements are like a financial snapshot of the business, showing how much money they're making, how much they owe, and how much cash they have on hand.
Exactly. And they're crucial not just for the business owners themselves, but also for investors, lenders, and anyone else who needs to understand the financial health of the company. The book also mentions financial ratios, which are calculations that compare different items on these statements to provide insights into things like profitability and liquidity. It's like taking a deeper dive into the numbers to understand the story they're telling.
So it sounds like ratios are a way to go beyond just the surface level numbers and get a more nuanced understanding of how the business is actually performing.
They are, and they can be incredibly helpful for making strategic decisions. But let's talk about a more specialized area of accounting that's become increasingly important. Forensic accounting. It's like the detective work of the accounting world, focused on uncovering financial irregularities and fraud.
Ooh, now that sounds intriguing, like something out of a crime drama.
It can be. Forensic accountants are trained to look for red flags, analyze transactions, and interview employees to piece together the puzzle and identify any wrongdoing. The book actually mentions the Bernie Madoff case, where forensic accountants played a crucial role in unraveling his massive Ponzi scheme.
Wow, so they're like the financial superheroes protecting investors and upholding the integrity of this system. It's reassuring to know that there are people out there dedicated to catching the bad guys in the financial world. But let's shift back to the more practical side of things, managing finances.
Yeah, financial management is all about making smart decisions with the company's money to achieve its objectives. It's about planning, organizing, controlling, and directing those resources effectively. The book does a good job of explaining the different aspects of financial management, from securing funding to managing cash flow to making investment decisions.
One of the things that stood out to me was the discussion of debt financing versus equity financing. It seems like choosing the right funding strategy can have a huge impact on the trajectory of a business.
Absolutely. Debt financing involves borrowing money, which has to be repaid with interest. Equity financing involves selling ownership shares in the company, giving up some control but potentially sharing in the profits. The book actually tells the story of Bevel, a company that makes shaving products for men with coarse or curly hair. They were able to secure venture capital funding, which is a type of equity financing often used by startups with high growth potential.
That's a great example of how the right funding strategy can fuel a company's success. But let's talk about managing those day-to-day financial needs. Cash flow seems like a constant juggling act for businesses.
It can be. The book highlights tools like trade credit, where businesses buy goods or services on credit, and promissory notes, which are formal promises to pay a specific amount by a certain date. It's all about finding ways to manage those short-term cash needs and keep the business running smoothly.
And then there are those unexpected challenges that can arise, like needing to bridge a gap in cash flow or needing funds quickly to take advantage of an opportunity. The book talks about factoring, which involves selling unpaid invoices to a third party at a discount to get immediate cash. It sounds like a useful tool at a pinch, but probably not something you'd want to rely on regularly.
Exactly. And then there's the rise of online lenders, which have really disrupted the traditional lending landscape. Companies like Lending Club and On Deck use technology to streamline the process and make it easier for businesses to access funding. But as with any financial decision, it's important to do your research and compare options carefully.
Speaking of looking ahead, the book also emphasizes the importance of long-term financial planning. It's about taking a big-picture view of your finances, setting goals, and developing strategies to achieve them.
Exactly. It's not just about surviving today, it's about thriving tomorrow. And the book uses the example of Netflix, which started as a DVD rental company and completely transformed itself into a global streaming giant. Their success was largely due to their ability to anticipate changes in the market and make bold investments in new technologies.
Talk about a company that wasn't afraid to pivot. It's inspiring to see how a company can adapt and evolve to stay ahead of the curve. But let's dive into something that's captured the imaginations of countless people: the world of investing.
Ah, yes, the pursuit of financial growth. The book does a good job of explaining the fundamental difference between saving and investing. Saving is about preserving your capital, while investing is about putting your money to work with the goal of generating a return.
Right. It's about understanding that risk and reward go hand in hand. The book outlines a variety of investment options, from low-risk choices like U.S. Treasury securities to higher-risk options like stocks and bonds.
It's all about finding the right balance for your individual circumstances and risk tolerance. And diversification is key. Spreading your investments across different asset classes can help mitigate risk. The book actually tells the story of Jim Cramer, the colorful host of Mad Money. He started out selling ice cream at Yankee Stadium, but he had this knack for business and a passion for investing. He went on to Harvard Law School, worked on Wall Street, and eventually became a media personality, sharing his investment insights with the world.
Talk about an unconventional path to success. It's a reminder that there are many ways to navigate the world of finance. But let's get into the nitty-gritty of how stocks are actually traded. The book does a good job of explaining the role of stock markets, those platforms where buyers and sellers come together to trade shares of publicly traded companies.
Yeah, it's like a giant auction house for stocks. And the book highlights some of the most prominent exchanges, like the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ. The NYSE is known for its physical trading floor, while the NASDAQ is a virtual exchange. But the lines have blurred in recent years as both exchanges have embraced electronic trading.
It's amazing to think about the sheer volume of transactions that take place on these exchanges every day. But how do companies actually get their stocks listed on these exchanges? It's not like just any company can decide to go public.
No, there are definitely strict requirements. Companies have to meet certain financial benchmarks, adhere to corporate governance standards, and go through a rigorous application process. It's all about ensuring that only financially sound and well-managed companies are listed on these exchanges.
Makes sense. The book also mentions a law that's made it easier for smaller companies to enter the public markets, the JOBS Act. It allows companies to raise capital through crowdfunding, which is basically soliciting small investments from a large number of people.
Right. It's like Kickstarter for stocks. It's opened up new avenues for companies to access funding, but it's also important for investors to be aware of the risks involved. Just because a company is able to raise money through crowdfunding doesn't automatically guarantee its success.
Solid point. But let's talk about something a little less savory: insider trading. The book does a good job of explaining how this illegal practice can give certain individuals an unfair advantage in the market.
It's basically using non-public information to profit from buying or selling securities. Imagine you're an executive at a company and you know about a merger that's going to boost the stock price. You could use that information to buy up a bunch of stock before the news goes public and then sell it for a huge profit once the price jumps.
That sounds incredibly unethical and illegal, right?
Absolutely. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, is responsible for enforcing laws against insider trading. They're like the watchdogs of the stock market, making sure everyone plays by the rules. But it's important to remember that not all stock market activity takes place on U.S. exchanges.
Right. The book talks about the growing importance of foreign stock exchanges, reflecting the increasing globalization of the financial system. Investors can now buy and sell stocks of companies from all over the world. It's like a truly global marketplace.
Exactly. And this trend is only going to continue as the global economy becomes more interconnected. But let's get back to the basics of how companies actually raise money through stocks.
Okay, so when a company goes public, they're selling ownership shares to investors in exchange for cash. But there are actually different types of stock they can issue, right?
That's right. The most common types are common stock and preferred stock. Common stock gives shareholders voting rights in the company and the potential to receive dividends. Preferred stock typically doesn't give voting rights but guarantees a fixed dividend payment.
So common stock is more like having a voice in the company's direction, while preferred stock is more like a bond providing a steady stream of income.
That's a good way to think about it. But there's another concept that's often talked about when it comes to investing in stocks: buying on margin.
Okay, I've heard that term before, but I'm not entirely sure what it means.
It's basically borrowing money from a broker to buy stocks. It allows investors to amplify their potential returns, but it's also a very risky strategy. If the stock price goes down, they could lose more money than they initially invested.
So it's like a double-edged sword. Higher potential rewards, but also higher potential losses. The book also provides some helpful tips on understanding stock quotes, those snapshots of a stock's trading activity at a particular point in time.
Right. Stock quotes provide valuable information like the stock's price, trading volume, and price history. It's like getting a quick glimpse into how the market is valuing that company at a particular moment.
It's amazing how much information is packed into those little quotes. But let's talk about the institutions that make all of this possible. Financial institutions. The book does a good job of explaining the role they play as intermediaries between savers and borrowers.
They're like the matchmakers of the financial system, channeling funds from those who have excess capital to those who need it for investments, businesses, or other purposes. The book highlights different types of financial institutions, including commercial banks, savings and loan associations, credit unions, and even non-banks.
It's interesting to see how these institutions have evolved over time. Commercial banks are the ones we're all familiar with, offering a wide range of services. But credit unions, which are member-owned cooperatives, have gained popularity for their focus on serving their members' needs.
And then you have non-banks, which offer more specialized services but often come with higher fees and interest rates. It's important to be aware of the different types of financial institutions and choose the ones that best suit your needs. But one thing that's become increasingly clear in recent decades is this globalization of the financial system.
Right. It seems like money flows freely across borders now, and financial institutions operate on a global scale. It's both exciting and a bit daunting.
It certainly presents both opportunities and challenges. On the one hand, it allows for greater access to capital and facilitates international trade. But on the other hand, it can make it more difficult for governments to regulate financial markets and prevent crises. It's a constant balancing act.
It makes you realize how interconnected the world really is, especially when it comes to finance. But as we wrap up this deep dive into business and finance, I think the key takeaway for me is that it's a constantly evolving landscape. What worked yesterday might not work today, and what works today might not work tomorrow.
It's about being adaptable, staying informed, and being willing to embrace change. And I think that's a valuable lesson for anyone, whether they're running a business, managing their personal finances, or simply trying to navigate the complexities of the modern world.
Absolutely. So listeners, you continue to explore the world of business and finance. Remember that knowledge is power. Stay curious, stay informed, and never stop learning. It really does. It feels like lifelong learning is like the key to staying ahead in this crazy world.
Yeah.
But amidst all this talk of, complex financial systems and global trends and stuff, I think it's easy to forget about something really fundamental. the human element. This book actually circles back to that idea at the end. It highlights the importance of human resource management.
Yeah, so true. We can talk all day about numbers and strategies, but at the end of the day, businesses are made up of people, and managing those people effectively is crucial. The book actually defines human resource management as the process of attracting, developing, retaining, and motivating employees, which is a lot.
It's about creating a work environment where people feel valued, challenged, and motivated to do their best work.
Yeah.
But it's also about making sure you have the right people in the right roles right. That seems like a huge challenge in itself.
Oh, it is. And the book actually breaks down the key functions of human resource management, starting with recruitment and selection. It's about identifying the skills and qualities needed for a particular job, attracting qualified candidates,
Yeah.
and then choosing the best fit. It's almost like matchmaking.
I can imagine that process has become even more complex in today's digital world. You've got online job boards, social media recruiting, all these different tools and techniques.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely evolved. And the book actually talks about the importance of employer branding, creating a positive image of your company as a desirable place to work. It's not just about attracting talent, it's about attracting the right talent, people who align with your company's values and culture. But once you've hired those great people, you've got to keep them engaged and motivated.
Right. The book talks about training and development as a key function of human resource management. It's about investing in your employees, helping them grow their skills, and providing opportunities for advancement. Which makes sense. I mean, if you want your employees to stay and contribute to your company's success, you've got to give them a reason to stick around.
For sure. And it's not just about those, formal training programs either. It's also about creating a culture of learning, where employees are encouraged to share knowledge, mentor each other, and continuously improve their skills. But, let's not forget about the financial side of human resource management. Compensation and benefits play a huge role in attracting and retaining talent.
Absolutely. Salary is obviously important, but the book also highlights the importance of benefits packages, things like health insurance, retirement plans, and paid time off. It's about creating a total rewards package that meets the needs of your employees and makes them feel valued. But it's also about being competitive, right? You've got to offer a compelling package to attract top talent.
Absolutely. And it's about finding the right balance. You want to offer a competitive package, but you also have to make sure it's sustainable for the business. It's all about finding that sweet spot. But let's not forget about another crucial aspect of human resource management: performance management.
Right. It's about setting clear expectations, providing feedback, and evaluating employee performance, making sure everyone's on the same page and working towards the same goals. But I can imagine this can be a tricky area to navigate. How do you provide constructive feedback without demoralizing employees? How do you create a culture of accountability without making people feel micromanaged?
It's a delicate balance, for sure. And the book actually talks about the importance of using performance reviews as an opportunity for growth and development, not just a time to point out, shortcomings. It's about having those open and honest conversations, focusing on solutions, and helping employees reach their full potential. But, sometimes despite your best efforts, things don't always work out. The book also addresses the difficult topic of employee separation, whether it's voluntary or involuntary.
Right. Whether it's an employee deciding to move on or a company needing to downsize, those transitions can be challenging for everyone involved.
Yeah.
Seems like handling those situations with empathy, fairness, and transparency is crucial. But let's talk about something a bit more positive: the future of work. The book actually has a whole section on how technology, globalization, and other trends are reshaping the workplace.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time to be in the business world. The rise of remote work, the gig economy, artificial intelligence, all these trends are transforming the way we work, where we work, and even what work looks like. It's pretty wild.
The book actually talks about the growing importance of soft skills, things like communication, collaboration, problem solving, and adaptability. It makes sense. As technology takes over more routine tasks, those uniquely human skills become even more valuable.
Absolutely. And I think we're seeing a shift away from those traditional hierarchical structures toward more agile and flexible organizations. Companies that can adapt quickly to changing market conditions, embrace innovation, and empower their employees will have a real competitive advantage in this new world of work.
It sounds like the future of work is going to be less about where you are and more about what you can do. It's about being a lifelong learner, embracing new technologies, and continuously developing those essential human skills. As we wrap up this deep dive into the world of business, I think that's a powerful message to leave our listeners with.
It's been an amazing exploration. You know, all these key concepts, trends, and challenges shaping the business world today. And I think the overarching theme is that business is ultimately about people, the people who run businesses, the people who work in businesses, and the people who, consume the products and services that businesses create. It's about understanding human needs and motivations and aspirations and, creating value that benefits everyone involved.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey into the world of business. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and are feeling inspired to apply what you've learned to your own endeavors.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep innovating.